Hello, all, and welcome to that InboxArmy podcast. I'm your host, Scott Cohen, and with me today, the Daryl Hall to my John Oates is my co-host, Garen Hobbs. Garen, how you doing today?
Not too bad, Scott. Pleasure to be here as always. Excited for today's
Awesome.
conversation.
Yeah, totally. Today we're talking the topic du jour, AI. Oh God, yet another podcast on AI. But we've got the right person to talk about it because it seems like AI really is a panacea for marketers, isn't it? The cure-all for our woes. And it could be. It could be. But not without some good thinking and planning behind it. We're going to dissect AI quite a bit today with our guests, specifically speaking to how data powers AI to ultimately power that elusive thing in email marketing we call personalization. To help us unpack this topic, joining us today is the founder of Campaign Genius, co-founder of Social Signal AI, and the host of the Future of Email podcast, Dr. Matthew Dunn. Matthew, welcome to the podcast.
Hey guys, great to join you. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. If we're going to talk about nerd topics, we go out and get the premier nerds. That's what I like to say. So, it's what we do.
Yeah.
But before we start nerding out, I'd love to learn about people's journeys, how they ended up where they are now. Tell us about your journey to today.
No, I'll keep it I'll keep it short. My first job with email in the title was in 1990.
Whoa.
Yes, before SMTP email was getting used, before a whole bunch of other stuff back in the days of corporate lands and Novell networks and stuff like that.
We found an OG. We found an OG, Garen. This. Wow.
Beat that date, baby.
Long live the listserv.
Yeah, beat that date. Long live the listserv. Yeah, and I used email on 300 baud modem 3-4 years earlier than that, but we'll leave that one aside. Yeah, so I jumped from the arts into technology a long time ago and have found that to be a great combination and haven't really looked back. And I've worked at big corps and small corps and started my own. And I've been a serial entrepreneur for something like 15 years and try to be a scholar of the space and understand where things come from and think about where they might go, realizing we don't really know. We're just along for the ride.
Yeah. We really are.
Yeah,
Absolutely. It's a solid provenance. But let's dive into it, Matthew. All of us on this call, and I imagine the majority of our listeners have been around long enough to know that many things that are now being called AI today have been around for quite a number of years, right? Send time optimization, dynamic content, audience selection, etc. Hell, even the windshield wipers on my Tundra are being called AI. I feel a raindrop. Let's start on, right? But
right.
certainly, it seems to be a slight stretching of the truth. What's different about today's AI when it comes to email marketing?
I think the threshold we passed, a year and a half ago or something like that, when AI went from academic initials to cocktail conversation overnight with ChatGPT, was that outputs suddenly felt credible, almost human. Gee, I could have written that. Gee, that was written by a machine. Your windshield wipers, your machine learning, your machine learning results, like amazing stuff. And AI is over 50 years old as a field, over 50 years old. But it never hit that threshold of how in the heck did you do that? And suddenly it did. That's my reaction. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah. It seems to be more of a label than a strict definition, right? It's people are applying that, I think, more conveniently rather than via scientific qualification, so to speak.
Absolutely, and it's a big enough label where the fact that it should be differentiated and that there are nuances, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's like internet. There's a whole lot of detail to that word, but it doesn't matter. We just go internet, digital, and it means something big culturally and economically, even historically. And this is the second ride. You guys both have a little gray on the temples there. This is the second time on the carousel, right? We all watched digital kind of bust loose and go bananas, and it was fun, it was fascinating, it was challenging. AI feels like it's got the same cultural magnitude or cultural velocity. Maybe it doesn't, but it feels like it does. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my snarky comment is we're past the days where people care about HAL and Skynet, right? I mean, the 70s, 80s, and 90s were filled with the robots are coming for us if they get too smart.
Yeah.
And now we're like, no robots can do my job, thank you very much. I'm still waiting for the robots to do my laundry, but but to your point, that speed, the ease of adoption is really where things catch hold, right? When the internet was new, you still kind of had to be a nerd to know how to use it.
Sure. Yeah.
Once you got through the only nerds can use it, I'm not saying nerds as a bad thing, right? But I'm like, we're in this, you think about the last 10, 15 years, nerds are good now, right? Like nerds used to be something people made fun of, and now nerds are a good thing.
Well, there's a typo in the Bible. It's actually the geek shall inherit the earth. I just didn't have to do that. Yeah.
And what's the difference between a nerd and a geek? Somebody explained it to me once, but I don't remember. But that ease of access. It's a D20 and you know it. Or I can do a 20-30 on you. I've been playing D&D too much. But my point is, like, that it's accessible, that's where things take hold, is that accessibility piece of it. Not, we talked about accessibility in email last episode, but that when people can adopt it easily, that's when it takes hold. I mean, my kids are all both younger than the iPhone. They don't know what life was like before the iPhone.
But let me jump in on that, because it's really important for context, right? Whose quip? Newton's quip. If I've seen further, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. The same thing happens with innovation, and the previous innovations provide the platform for the new one and change the velocity of the new one, right? Internet, 10 years to kind of roll out and become almost everyone's got it. Smartphones, 3, 4, 5 years, everyone's got one. ChatGPT went to iPhone-like numbers in something like a month or 2 months, because it literally took you typing 7 or 8 characters in the device, in your pocket, on the network already in the sky to get to it. Of course it was fast.
Yeah.
Of course it was fast.
Yeah. When you think about the speed of it, I can't remember where I read it, but it was something like my kids, and like by 2050, the rate of innovation that we see today in like 10 years will happen like every 11 minutes or something. It's something absurd. And I go, I can't even keep up with this crap. What's going to happen by 2050, right? So I'll be old and I can be the curmudgeon in the corner. It'll be fine. But, it's crazy.
There's a point buried in that too, Scott, though, because it's partially what it can do, and it's partially is it useful enough, and are enough of us doing it to hit that sort of cultural velocity take up, right? There were predictions that nanotechnology, helicopter overhead, interesting. There were predictions, 10 years ago, we're all in on nanotech, it's the big revolution. Didn't happen, right? Doesn't mean there's not useful stuff. But when's the last time you talked about nanotechnology at a cocktail party? Yeah. Somehow AI hit the cultural velocity thing and has enough utility, I would argue. There's enough utility in the various AI technologies to say, yeah, I might use that, or I might try that, or I might actually use it every day because it's making my life easier, things go faster, wash my clothes better, or something like that. So this one hit. This one hit. And still not making money.
Oh, wait, hold on. We're gonna make money off of this. Right. Yeah. But you mentioned like a lot of capability, right? A lot of capabilities with it. A lot of general use. I mean, everybody can use Chat GPT. That general use can really be, but there's a lot that needs, like, from an email perspective, from a marketer perspective. What do you need to power it correctly, effectively, right? Like, what are the resources? What's the infrastructure look like? Because people think it's an easy button, but to your point about standing on the shoulders of giants, like, there's so much work that goes into it. Walk us through that.
I suspect if we could magically canvas 100 or 1,000 people working away in email marketing and say, are you making use of AI technologies, plural? What are you doing with it? We'd find a whole lot of experimentation, a whole lot of cheating, and a whole lot of adaptation of general use tools, your word, for what's actually a really specific, difficult, and targeted discipline, right? Hey, I got ChatGPT writing subject lines. That may not be the best idea you had. It may look like it's making your life easier, but is it? Are the results better? Are customers opening more? Do they understand what you said, et cetera? Or are you just, I'm great with experimentation. Like, we should be doing that. And any company that's not budgeting for go break stuff, go try stuff, is going to get left behind eventually by the companies that are breaking stuff and trying stuff. But do we have tools specific to the discipline built on that stack of technologies? Not a ton yet, I don't think. And a lot of the ones I've seen in the last year in the email space have been sort of text content centric because that's what the marquee platforms afford. That's what the marquee platforms make fairly readily available. I've got code sitting right here that calls the Chat GPT API and says, take this and do that with it and give me some text back. Why? That's relatively easy to do. Is that going to solve my problem? Maybe. Wouldn't it need to be pretty specific for the domain of email and marketing, which is so emotional and touch centric, right? So hard and delicate. My reaction. What do you guys think?
I've said in some previous articles I've written that, well, I think AI is great for saving on some repetitive tasks, is good for sort of basic input, especially when it comes to marketing. The real danger is losing that EQ, right? When it comes to making decisions, whether they're purchase decisions, service decisions, or any other decisions, 90+% of that is driven by emotion, right? And the context that feeds that emotion. And that's the big element that I see really missing from AI is its current limited ability to understand and take into account context, and then the emotional drivers that are the summation of that context.
Because that requires training. The training of the AI, the training of the model to learn. And I'm not saying it's going to get there, but I'm saying, like, I think the issue comes in of the easy button going, oh, it can make my decisions for me, and it already has my brain, and it doesn't, and it never will. To your point, those emotional decisions, sometimes marketing is gut reaction, right? I think this is going to work. Experiment with it. Let's test it. It's just a numbers game. Yeah. At least right now, the way AI is right now is just a numbers game. So, but people think, oh, if I just plug it in, it'll learn everything. And go, no, it just knows what the inputs are and is making some assumptions, kind of like you would, but not as informed because you don't have your human experience to add on to it.
It doesn't, but there's a bit of the promise as well, and I'm sure I won't say this well, but I'll fumble my way through it. In some of the work that I've been hands-on literally for the last month on with AI, it's really kind of jarringly cool to use it as a mirror that doesn't look like me, that doesn't have my bio. Like, I write up something that I think is emotional, compelling, engaging. And I say, okay, Skippy, reword that for me, or reword that for a different audience, or rewrite that. And like, wow, I wouldn't have thought to put it that way, or I wouldn't have used that phrase. And it's like, we're all captive of our own bio, right? What we think's compelling, emotional, engaging, etc. Yes, for some of the audience, and no for others. And it's a little hard to get out of your own frame. And because the outputs look so credible, because the language is well structured, because models can do that kind of stuff. And like, nothing else, it's pretty refreshing to go, oh, that's a good rewrite. I may not use it, but I'm going to learn something. I'm going to learn something by taking a look at it, even just to pick on subject lines, right? Even if you say, okay, I think this is going to be the winner subject line, give me 6 others, even if you don't use them, it's jarringly cool to have them come back and be worth looking at. It's jarringly cool that you can learn something from them, even if you don't use them.
Yeah. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And of all the things I see value in the AI tool sets du jour, it's the learning, the pedagogical, the learning assistance, right? If you're writing code, if you're writing English, I wouldn't say for graphic design, but being able to go, crap, I need a quick request loop to throw this at that API, and I don't feel like writing it for the 50th time. Would you take a crack at there for me, Skippy? And Skippy comes back with really well written, well commented code. I would be too lazy to comment that well. Cool, thanks. I'll use that loop. I'll ignore that other one. But that's pretty cool stuff, and I can focus on something that's more interesting, more challenging, whatever else. Yeah, and there's got to be thousands of places where this stuff is starting to creep in, and we didn't realize that's how you did that, or that's how he did that, or she did that. Yeah.
Yeah. My wish was when I was working on Salesforce Marketing Cloud and I wanted them to write me a SQL query, and ChatGPT couldn't write Salesforce's SQL query.
Okay. Right.
Generic SQL query. So there's that. You talk about nuance, right? Like that's the part where the model has to learn and go, oh, you're in Salesforce, bloop, 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 bloop. Here's what you got to do.
Right. Is it there yet, by the way, on Salesforce specific SQL syntax? Or is it not?
It's been a year and a half since I've tried it, so I don't know.
Because I do a bunch of stuff with BigQuery, Google's data warehouse, and it uses like old English, right? It's got this really rigid SQL syntax, and I'm like, it's helped me learn, it being the various AIs that run on various windows here. It's helped me learn a ton. I'm like, how the heck do you do blah, blah, blah? And sometimes the approach is, like one approach was a complete meltdown. I actually made BigQuery lock up, which takes me doing. I'm like, yeah, nice try, Skippy. But I understand why you tried the coalesce function. Let's just not do that again, shall we? But it knows the syntax for that particular flavor of SQL, which is freaking remarkable to me.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
I imagine it's learned quite a bit since I tried it, but I just went, I don't want to bother my developer. Can I just do a SQL query through ChatGPT and do this really fast? And it went, nope, not even close. And then I sent it to my developer, and he's just shaking his head like, where did you get this? I'm like, I tried GPT. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. But how long till your developer starts using a similar tool to help with something that's repetitive but still has to be done?
Oh, I'm sure. Anything that makes their lives easier, right? Anything that makes our lives easier that's actually legit. I always question if you can get you 90% of the way there, is that last 10%, is that really where your time is spent anyway?
Yeah.
If you're talking like any sort of code, like, oh, it got me 90% of the way there, but actually that stuff's easy. It's the 10% that I got to do anyway. That once it solves that 10%, then you're in business.
Yeah.
Or then you're in trouble.
Or you're in trouble.
Well, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Matthew, when I think about the application of AI into marketing, rightly or wrongly, the image that is evoked in my mind here is that scene from Minority Report, right? Tom Cruise's character walks into Gap, and the robotic AI assistant says, "Mr. Anderson, here are the white T-shirts we know that you wanted to buy today," right? Pretty impressive, and maybe we'll get there one day. But it strikes me that the ability to get there and to deliver that level of personalized experience is very much data-driven. And we know that AI, just like many other things that are data-driven, is very much a garbage in, garbage out consideration, right? When it comes to data, it always seems to boil down to collection and usage, right? How can AI help facilitate the collection and later analysis of data? And part two, what are the inherent risks in that given the state of AI today?
Well, the collection side, let's tackle that first. You get collection use analysis, and then we talk downside, right? The collection side's either intriguing or scary. Would I be accurate and fair in saying average email program now is built on first-party data? Yeah?
For the most part, yeah.
For the most part. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So if you want to do anything other than send everybody exactly the same stuff, you got some degree of how do we tell them apart, right? How do we group them, or what's the term, segment them. Well, this guy told us these things and that guy told us these other things. Okay, cool. We can put a dividing line in our data set and put them apart. None of us have the tolerance for providing very much of that stuff, either for privacy concerns or for the I am not going to fill in that many freaking boxes concern, at least like sort of voluntary disgorging. Like, you want to know my household income? Yeah, I don't think so. Right. Now, we may sort of tack it on secondarily if we're running the show really, really well and go, oh, well, we'll purchase data and move that over from our platform where they buy things and go, oh, wow, Scott buys a lot of fill in the blanks, right? D&D stuff, maybe. Cool, we know more about Scott.
I talk a big game. That's not true.
Yeah. Is that part going to get easier? I'm sure there'll be algorithmic approaches to say we can infer a lot more accurately with less effort, right? Scott bought one D&D thing, ergo, he probably has this fashion sense. I don't know. I'm just making up connections, right? We'll probably get better at the statistical guesswork because of at least one family of technologies we're calling AI. Creates another problem set that we should talk about downstream, but I'm not going to spend more time filling in boxes, neither are you, right? And if you look at law and laws as an expression of sort of cultural thinking, cultural evolution, we sure have a hell of a lot of privacy laws we didn't have 2 years ago at a state by state level in the U.S. Why? Because we're all going, a little kind of bummer of a birthmark, Hal. I'm a little tired of that target on my chest and of feeling like I've been sliced and diced and stuck in a whole bunch of databases that I didn't actually ask to be in the first place. So when someone says, oh, well, AI is going to make that easier, we'll have the same reaction, like, frick, here we go. Hey, I don't want it to be easier. I want it to be harder. I want a big red button that says, leave me the heck alone somewhere on my desk, which creates an interesting risk. Like, I suspect companies are going to do a lot more making stuff up thanks to AI.
Interesting. They're already making stuff up now.
Of course. Why? Because nobody has.
Just look at LinkedIn and here's the story of me meeting this CMO and they talked about this, and you go, no. Or, and the garbage in, garbage out. I get cold email.
Yeah.
And as CEO, I've gotten even more, right?
Oh, sure.
Moving to the CEO position. But then you get the whole, hey, as the wrong title. And I go, I don't hide who I am. Right. So on the one hand, it should make things easier. It also makes mistakes that much worse, right? Because if people are out there with certain things about them and you get that part wrong, how does AI make that? Does it close the gap, or to your point, are they just going, whatever?
Well, here's a different riff on making stuff up, and this is the one I see as perhaps more dangerous. It's a lot easier to make, excuse me, credible enough stuff up at low to no cost that the volume is going to go like this, right? The cliche, not even 5 years ago in the email space, was email from a Nigerian prince wanting to share wealth with you. And we would all laugh because we could all spot it, right? Now, I got to bet there's some very well-tailored, very PII-driven emails that are scary good at looking like something that I should act on or respond to. Like, I got a string of spam mails the other day with the Wells Fargo logo and pseudo bank language, and like, they weren't that well done. Like, oh, give me a break. No frickin' way, right? But they were a lot better than they were even a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah.
They keep getting closer. Yeah. And okie dokie, let's say hypothetically they hit perfect, right? Someone builds SpamBot, and SpamBot is just brilliant at taking everything known about Garrett Hobbs and putting together the most compelling email from someone he knows and loves that gets him to click a link. How the heck are we going to stop that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just, and I don't know that we as humans are getting any smarter. So we're going to have to rely yet again on technology to protect us from technology, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was it? The AIs are going to talk to each other? Like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a wolf and hen house type of situation for sure.
But we'll always have the root reaction. I think this is historically grounded. Root reaction for completely new set of possibilities. There's always a healthy degree of fear. We always do the speculation about like the bad side of it, right? But when we didn't know what lay beyond a certain number of miles out to sea, we stuck monsters on the map and said, "Here be monsters."
Yep.
Why? Because we didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And it was deep, and we didn't have submarines, and it might be scary down there, and it might not. We don't really know. So one of our reactions is certainly going to mix in a healthy, as an animal species, healthy sense of fear and flight. There's always going to be people who exploit that gap too. Always, always, always.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta bet there are lots of bad guys doing a whole lot of work with AI right now, like that stupid spam email that I got. And the notion of bad guy with some intent and a little bit of taste armed with an AI is a lot scarier than just the AI itself. Right?
Well, I mean, it's what's bad, the tool or the person using it,
right? Yeah.
It's that, like, going back to the 70s and 80s and 90s, it was when the tool becomes self-aware and doesn't want the user to exist anymore.
Right.
That was that was the whole thing with HAL and with Skynet and all that. It was, they're going to get rid of us because they don't need us anymore, except as batteries if we're going to the Matrix. It's
that's the here be monsters scenario, right? The we be monsters is the scarier scenario.
right.
It is.
Yeah.
And what happens? Well, you get pirates, you get privateers, you get pilgrims, you get people who rush into the new space, and then I'm fast forwarding a whole bunch. The successful ones ask for laws and barbed wire later on. Always. The guy who went out to the frontier and built a big old ranch is the first guy to want a law office and titles on file and barbed wire defining his ranch. Why? Because he worked his butt off to build it and he wants to keep it.
Yep.
So, and we're in the early stages of that right now. We're in the really early stages of AI stuff. It's messy, it's goofy. There's going to be bad guys. There's going to be, entrepreneurs, aka pirates. Like we're going to have the whole mix of it. But because it's not like a clear spatial division, you could say, I choose not to go to the frontier. We're living on the frontier. It does feel a little more imminent, doesn't it?
It's Wild West right now. It's really what it is.
I liken it to the explosion of the oil boom in the early part of the last century, right? Just wildcatters everywhere, everyone trying to stake their own ground, get what they can of it, take a different approach, and just take what they can without really thinking about the responsible way forward. It's just forward, come hell or let it.
Yeah. And look, we in the oil boom, the rail oil industrial boom, we threw a whole lot of stuff over the side of the train onto the dirt and didn't think about it. And now we're going like, oh, that was awful, right? But what we thought was an externality turns out to be very much not an externality. I wonder if trust and attention are at risk of being the things we pollute with what we're doing now.
Well, let's go back to that Wells Fargo example as a scary good example of what personalization can do to break through that. But let's talk about personalization on the positive side. Because a lot of what we talk about with that data and personalization is the output of that data. Yeah. But I mean, if you ask 5 different people what personalization means, you get 5 different answers, right? So what does personalization mean to you, Dr. Matthew Dunn?
I'm glad you asked, because I actually I don't know if I wrote a rant blog or just harassed people on an OI. There is no actual definition of personalization. There is no definition. It's a BS term because we all use it and we don't actually have any sort of rigorous structured definition of what the heck personalization is.
It's the email space. Do we define anything?
No, we just have the same
I was going to say, the same word for the same thing? Yeah.
Well, let's define the SMTP hello, and that works. Right? No, it's a remarkably squishy, remarkably non-rigorous thing. When you look at the number of dollars attached to personalization, either spent or in effort, like, wow, every company in the world that's doing any marketing is spending tons on personalization. What is it? We don't really know.
I'm sorry, it's dear first name.
Right. Now, what's the motive? Because you always see the survey. Well, consumers surveyed want personalization. Well, you asked them that, so of course they said yes. What do we think they mean when they say they want personalization? I mean, if someone asked me, I'd say, well, yeah, of course. What do I mean by that? Well, more efficient, more relevant, less irrelevant, more not targeted. It's not what I want, but closer to my interest, predilection, something like that. I usually give the example. There's a big retailer that I bought a ton of outdoor stuff from over a lot of years, and they still send me ads for the other stuff. I'm like, frick, guys, laser in. You know I fly fish. You know I this. You know I that. If you would put more of that under my nose, I would buy more of it. And I would hate your emails less because I'm not going to buy the other stuff. Seems like personalization to me, because there's a marriage of my interests and their interests, their business interests, that's probably better for both of us. So I don't know if that's a definition, but it's kind of a working heuristic or something like that. Like, okay, let's find an overlap point where I don't want you to say, oh yeah, we noticed you were on Scott's podcast an hour ago, so we think we're going to sell you a fly rod. That's creepy.
Yeah.
Right? That's too much, right? I didn't give you a yes for that. But if I bought enough of this from you for you to go, oh, you seem to like this stuff, seems like a reasonable trade-off, right? Reasonable trade-off of interest and time efficiency and things like that.
Well, especially with repetition, right? I mean, I think because the repetition means learning.
Yeah.
You know, if you only bought, but to the point, it's like, if you only bought one set of fly fishing, like that was the only thing you did with that retailer, they could go, okay, you did that, but you may also like these things. But if you've been buying the same stuff from them for 15 years and only that stuff.
Yeah. Seems like a signal.
It seems like a signal, but I'd like to say, you know, what we want in personalization is like the old 1950s, 1940s, like general store guy who knew what everybody wanted in town, right? It's like, oh, you have this, I'm going to keep that in stock for you. Oh, you want this, I'm going to keep that in stock for you. But nobody expects the big companies to be the general store owner. If they like that's what one-to-one really means, right? Like, if you run a general store and I come in and I always buy an ice cream float and, you know, candy. And then the next day I walk in, you go, hey, would you like a gun? It might be a little weird. But if I came in and I said, hey, I need a gun, you're going to go out and get it for me, right? So it's just like, you learn these things, and that's, you cannot replicate that at scale. You can't, right? And if you did, you'd probably scare the hell out of me, and I'd run screaming away and never buy from you again, right? At the same time, and you figured we'd get here sooner or later, the number of things that Amazon knows about me, like, oh crap, this is bad, or it's good. I think it's good because I keep buying stuff there, but it's unbelievable the number of purchases and the pattern to be derived from those purchases. And interestingly enough, one, Amazon never chases me an email to sell me more stuff. They opted not to quite some time ago because they don't need to, right? I'm going to go on the page, or more likely the app, and the pixels that are going to show up in front of my eyes are as personalized as you could freaking imagine. And that's one of the reasons why I keep using it. Like, I'm going to say, and Garen knows this story, but if they were to do that now, I'd probably be getting like items for coyote urine because I've been trying to get squirrels out of my backyard. And I bought that on Amazon. Talk about what you can buy on Amazon. Yes, you can buy legitimately farmed coyote urine
Hot
in a
ticket.
squirt bottle to spray around your house if you need to get rid of vermin.
Because those quillies will run away from that stuff, huh?
Apparently.
God bless that
Right.
farmer, but I wouldn't want to meet him.
And
Going back to sorry, go ahead.
and the crude digital no AI of not that many years ago, you'd have had coyote urine ads chasing you all over the internet for weeks, and you'd be like, A, creepy, B, I bought some, leave me alone, I don't need two of them. Right. So if Amazon or a merchant like that could go, bought one, our pattern mining says he's probably not going to need a second bottle, so let's lay off the coyote urine and find another topic that's more of interest, right? Does not tend to be repeat purchase. Check. Or would you like to subscribe, Scott?
Let's talk about the repeat purchase versus the sort of anomalous purchase that seems completely out of cycle, right? So going back to your early example, Matthew, of the outdoor retailer, we are continually buying fly fishing gear, and Scott's claim about, hey, the repetition is what makes that easy. Here's an example. I live in a rural area, so my local options for shopping are incredibly limited. So I tend to buy a lot of my clothes online. Now, I have one retailer that I favor over the others, and I'm continually buying shirts, pants, belts, shoes, things of that nature, right? And in a consistent size, despite my somewhat fluctuating waistline. In any case, occasionally I'll buy a dress or an item for my wife. What I receive next from this retailer is other dresses you will love, right? It's not in my size. It's completely out of category from the things that I buy, and yet they look at me as though this is something that I would love to continue buying without seeing that this is something that is out of cycle for me. What I'd love to see is that they recognize this is not my size. It's out of my category. He's buying for somebody else. Instead, it should be, here are other dresses she'll love. Not only is that more relevant, but plenty of studies show that when people are buying for others, they tend to spend more than when buying for themselves. Now, when I receive that email, it's, well, I don't love dresses, delete. But if it were other dresses she'll love, it evokes that sort of warm feeling I get when I give something to my wife that she really enjoys. I'd be far more compelled to open the email, click, and likely affect a purchase.
Yeah. No, it's a good example. Let's unpack it a little bit and try and figure out, at least somewhat, why it's not working like that now, and what we'd have to change to get there. I mean, one, the repetition and pattern detection stuff. I mean, you'd think that's possible, but it's really easy to take the convenient to hand narrative example of a story like that and go, should work. And then you're in the back end running the SQL queries or building the database. You go, oh my God, right? We have so much stuff. How do we find those signals out of all of this noise, right? Feels impossible now. We will get better at it, but it feels impossible now. One of my quips about AI is like compute and stats had a baby. And truthfully, one of the reasons I think we'll start sorting out stuff like finding that signal of this is Garen's size and gender, etc., is because it's really a stats and compute problem, a weird, goofy pattern recognition problem. You're not going to solve it with human beings, but it's probably eventually algorithmically more solvable than it is now. Okay, let's say we do solve it. If you got that email with the follow-up saying shoes she might like as well, is that cool by you? Is that creepy? Is that, how did they know? What do you think?
And now we're back to the subjectivity of what is creepy with regards to product recommendations, especially those driven by AI. Personally, I would love it. I would love that. There's nothing more terrifying than the prospect of just sort of blindly picking out something that I hope my wife will really enjoy, right? I mean, so much is emotionally tied to it. There's certain tastes, there's mood, there's a lot of temporal factors, not just preference factors. Right? So
we land back to Scott's General Store, don't we?
The gun versus the candy, for sure. What the hell's going on temporally there? But no, I mean, we don't tend to feel that it's particularly creepy when we see those types of recommendations coming from folks like Amazon. They may seem a little out of left, but I don't know too many people who test, really get creeped out by that level.
Yes.
If it's helpful, and if it's relevant, and if it isn't just too completely wild, then I'd imagine it probably passes the creepy factor test.
And it also passes a bit of a common sense test, right? You go, I can see how you came up with that. Like, that's actually kind of reasonable. Like, okay. But we bother ourselves, and I think probably should bother ourselves with the notion of the less obvious, less common sense, but nonetheless compelling offer. Like when I talk with companies in the marketing space, particularly the ones who are in the sort of the data business that I just don't like. Oh, we'll append blah 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 to your first party records. I'm like, I really hate you guys, because what you're doing is arming someone to chase me with a rifle scope that I don't want them to have. I don't want another party to know enough about me to be able to compel me to do things based on what they know about me. And at the same time, I don't know how to stop it.
It's. Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's stick with this topic of creepy, right? When we think about creepy, let's think about the root cause of creepy. And that's typically we feel as though we've been violated in some way. Typically our privacy has been violated in some way. I'm exposed, right? Which compels the Debbie Downer question here. How do we reconcile, thinking everything that we've discussed, the good scenarios, the bad scenarios, how do you, Matthew, reconcile privacy amidst all of this?
It's partially a power thing, isn't it? Right? Power and control thing. If I looked up and I saw my next door neighbor with his nose pressed against the front window, I'd be pretty cheesed off, right? It's my window, it's my lawn. Yes, I was sitting reading a book, but it's my business. If I wanted you to look, I'd freaking ask you to look, right? There's a boundary of control that I don't think is unnatural that says, that's not okay. Jerry, go away and clean the window before you do, by the way. Right. And companies are doing the equivalent of it right now. And I think that sort of creeping over that boundary of what we thought was locus of control for ourselves is what, or having power over us, is what bothers us, right? Oh man, I got that super compelling, really highly targeted offer. Didn't ask for it. And yet it's right on the mark. And somehow it's really bothersome to think there's enough of me floating around for that to have worked or been economical to produce and stuff like that. And I mean, look, the boundary conditions that we all live with now would probably have flipped our respective fathers or grandfathers the hell out in spades, right? Like, you what? You let them what? You tell them what? You actually sign on and buy things on a computer? Are you crazy? Right? that kind of stuff. And we mentioned laws earlier, right? We as a whole, we're going like, yeah, maybe that's got a little too porous, a little too much. EU, completely different, right? Barbed wire, no, you can't, you won't, you shouldn't, you don't. And the level of innovation they got to go with it, but leave that aside, right? And one guy's tolerance and another guy's tolerance don't necessarily ever match up. So we wait to make enough of a joint concern to make a joint decision to say, that's not okay, and that's now illegal. You can't do that anymore. And marketers operate to some extent right on the boundary condition of those things. If you're running a campaign for a client, Scott, and they're like, we really want to go whole hog personalization, you're like, well, you don't have the data to do it. But leaving that aside, how far do you want to go with this?
Right.
And there's like, if you go too far, very destructive, isn't it? Like, right? You can go too far.
We noticed. Yeah, your daughter Susie looked really lovely stepping off the bus today in her blue dress. Here's a belt. Here's a lovely red patent leather belt that would look excellent against her blue dress. It's like, whoa.
Well, I think there's also the natural limitations of your product too. I mean, if you are an overstocker at Amazon, you have a ridiculous amount of SKUs. You could recommend anything under the sun.
Yeah.
We have these. They are listening to us.
Yeah.
Regardless of what they tell you, we're not listening. How is it that Instagram gets ads that I go, I didn't even think I needed that, but holy crap, that's cool. Right? Yep. It's probably because I mentioned something around it. Just around the phone. Right?
Or it's the pattern says, this, statistically highly likely to need one of these.
Right.
Coyote urine, maybe squirrel gun next. Who knows, right? Kind of relevant.
And seeing that I'm almost there. I'm not a gun guy, but I'm almost there.
Yeah, they're really hard to get rid of.
But the only way that somebody will truly know is, the Musk going, hey, we're going to have Neuralink, and then we're going to have that. I'm like, there's like where like people are willing to trade privacy for value, just in general. I mean, especially in degrees. Especially in the U.S., but in degrees, of course, right? And those degrees are very dependent on brand or person or whoever it might be. Like, to literally an audience of one, like you said earlier, like our thresholds for what's creepy and what's not are different.
Yeah.
And what would not be creepy for me for one brand, that same level would be creepy for another brand is what I'm trying to say. So you're talking about something extremely subjective.
Yeah.
But you still have to reconcile it, right? Because once technology exists, who puts the barriers in? Are we expecting the operators to put it in? Are we expecting other people to put it in? It's a big question.
And we'll get that slow lag historical thing that says eventually, barbed wire and fences and lines and boundaries. Eventually, we don't have it yet for some of these new spaces, conceptual spaces. But eventually we will, just like we're now having conversations about internet privacy that maybe we wish we'd had 10 years ago, but we didn't. There wasn't enough hue and cry to do it. And for what it's worth, not a product plug, with Social Signal, like the issues you raised have been front and center conversation for us, because what we're about is telling you what broad group Garen's probably a member of and what that group is like, and not telling you anything about Garen. Thinking that, this is our thesis, right? Knowing, and by broad group, I mean like 500,000 people, 1 million people, 2 million people, surprisingly tight segment. Thinking that that's actually closer to what Garen or Scott wants in the way of personalized treatment, then let me spend a year building up a file on you and then talk about Susie stepping off the bus. Yeah. And it's an interesting challenge to sell, because the sort of first party to, like a squirrel collects stuff in Scott's yard, to eventually know enough to personalize. I don't think that method works. I think it's talked about. Was it Gartner said 18% of companies, 18% have the 360-degree view of the customer, meaning almost everybody fails at this.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised.
And I would say 50% of 18% are probably lying.
I think you're right. While chasing this weird chimera because of dear first name, I think that somehow collecting enough nuts means you're going to get a cake.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And we started with AI, and look what we got. How did you guys do this? That's amazing.
To your point, AI's been around for 50 years, right? So we've been talking about the same stuff for 50 years. I mean, people ask me all the time, what's different in email? I'm like, the how is different, the speed is different, the why, not so much. We're still trying to communicate with people, still trying to reach them emotionally, still try to get them to buy things that they may or may not actually need.
Do you think it's going to get harder?
Do.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are both practitioners. Is like, I look at my blast screens for what hits my inbox and the exhaustion of opening that inbox, and I'm like, shit.
It's why direct mail is back.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think it will get harder. We're seeing both the evolution as well as the democratization of these technologies, meaning they're available to more and more people, which has really leveled the playing field with regards to, retail, e-commerce, even just, provision of services, things of that nature.
Yeah.
Choice is only going to continue to grow. And, competition for our dollar, for our
For our
attention,
choice. Yes.
exactly has to grow accordingly. So
Yeah.
it is going to become difficult. I don't think it's going to become as difficult for those companies. I think it's going to become difficult for us as consumers, as decision makers, to really understand what is best and why, and the impact of me and my decisions on that. So I think it's going to get easier for those for the purveyors. I think it's going to get a little bit more difficult, challenging, and certainly confusing for those of us on the receiving side.
Yeah. Yeah. Which means that the companies, brands, organizations, or whatever, who figure out how to hit it right will do well, and the ones that hit it wrong will probably have an even harder time staying alive. And I don't know the right and wrong. I mean, that's what you guys advise clients on. But the super digital monopolies that are already in place are probably going to keep doing just fine, right? Amazon's not going away. And the companies and brands that might earn my particular allegiance because of how they treat me may be different for somewhere else, but I think our tolerance for being handled poorly is probably going to get even lower.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You look at the younger generations, and all studies indicate, or at least the majority of studies indicate, there is no brand loyalty there. It's literally driven by price and value, right? So I think those become the sort of tips of the spear.
Price, value, convenience, right?
Exactly. Well, I mean, yeah, correct. And then convenience and value both being subjective. Price is really the primary driver of them.
Yeah. So are we going to commoditize ourselves to death with that?
I think we kind of already are. We are the product in most cases, right? It's not. It's not who we're buying from. It's what we're providing back. It's
They also don't have money, so you buy what you're able to buy too. I mean, you get to a certain level and you can say, I'll invest in things I use every day and go cheap elsewhere. But
I'll bet you didn't. I'll bet you bought the A grade Coyote urine. I'm thinking you did not cut corners. That's important.
I did read reviews, I will tell you that much. It had to be at least 4 stars. Had to be at least 4 stars.
Not all Coyote urine is created equal.
And then I'm sitting there going, oh my God, people actually reviewed this stuff, which is hilarious in and of itself. Well, I think that's a great place to stop since we started and ended with Coyote urine. Matthew, where can people find out more about you and Campaign Genius and Social Signal?
Oh, let's do it backwards. socialsignal.ai, a website, obviously, and then Campaign Genius is campaigngenius.io. Haven't figured out those two yet. And then for professionally, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Just look for Matthew Dunn or Dr. Matthew.
Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to you, our listeners. Oh yeah, this was great. We could have gone on for a lot longer, but let's be fair to our listeners. If you'd like to learn more about InboxArmy, go to InboxArmy.com. Until next time, be safe and be well.